Forterra, and thank you, David, and thanks to everybody for attending today. It's great to see this level of interest and turnout for this topic. It is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and I'll share my screen because I've got a number of slides to share. Right, I think this should be working.
Looks good.
All right, super. In that case, just want to give a quick run through of what I'd like to cover today, starting out with some regional context of growth and conservation across the Central Puget Sound, and then giving a recap of transfer of development rights in concept, and then look a little bit at what's been going on specifically in Snohomish County over the last handful of years around this tool. And then really focus the bulk of the presentation on the regional transfer of development program, as Sarah mentioned, which we call LCLIP. And then I want to wrap up with looking at some opportunities for expanding use of the tool, both in Snohomish County and in the region, and also as it pertains to the work of the Sustainable Land Strategy. And before I get into the contents of the presentation, I do want to just take a quick minute to acknowledge the controversy surrounding the letter from the Squamish tribe and their assertions about the USDA grant for which we applied. I don't have a lot to share because I'm not really involved in those conversations or in the grant, but I just do want to acknowledge that this has been in the news and it's probably on a lot of people's minds and wondering how that affects Forterra and our work with partners around the region. What I can say is that we're taking it very seriously. We're engaging with the tribe and other partners in the grant, and we have retained an independent third-party law firm to look through all the details of the grant and what happened and try to understand all the context behind that. So that's about all the information I have, but if you do have other questions about that conversation or want to know more about it or what we're doing, please reach out to me. And if I can't answer those questions, I will get you in touch with somebody who can, because it is something we're taking very seriously. All right, onto the regional footprint, or the regional context. If we take an aerial view of the Central Puget Sound region today, this is looking kind of northeast to or northwest to southeast. This is more or less what land use patterns look like today in the Central Puget Sound, where these orange lines denote urban growth boundaries, and then all the gray indicates development. And so this is kind of what our footprint looks like now. And if we fast forward to the year 2100, and growth continues and build out happens, at the level that zoning allows for, this is what land use might look like in the future. So pretty big difference, a lot of green in this picture, turning to gray in this picture. It's a big change, a lot of rural and resource lands being converted to other uses. Now, if we were instead to take this amount of growth that we see in this picture and redirect most of it into our current urban footprint, we could accommodate that same amount of growth, but almost entirely within our existing urban footprint. So this is definitely, I think, a more sustainable land use future than this scenario. Still some more conversion than what we have today, but definitely less conversion than in the full rural and resource land build out future. So the question is, how do we get to this version of the future instead of this version of the future? One tool that will help us get there is transfer of development rights. And this is a market-based approach that uses real estate tools to allow landowners to sell a portion of their property interest and thereby permanently conserving their land. And they can sell the right to build in the form of development rights, and developers can then buy those rights and apply them to new construction in areas where we want more growth, and they can achieve some form of development bonus. Maybe that's additional units, maybe it's taller buildings, maybe it's a relaxation in parking requirements, some kind of added value to development in urban areas where growth is desired. And so the resource land, typically farm or forest land, is conserved through conservation easement. Landowners, they earn money for selling those development rights, and in exchange for buying those, developers get more value. So the idea here is that all the parties make money through conservation, and it's all done through the private market, which is important because part of the reason that market-based tools are valuable is that publicly funded acquisitions programs simply don't have enough resources to pay for all the conservation that we want to achieve. That's a main issue. Another one is timing. Conservation easement grant programs can also take 18 months, 2 years, however long to complete. Transfer of development rights can be done on a shorter time frame. So if timing is an issue for landowners and they're interested in selling their development rights, then this is a quicker approach for them to pursue. So does this tool actually work? In short, yes. In the central Puget Sound region, we've conserved collectively amongst all the TDR programs in the region about 145,000 acres. And to put that in context, that's about 3 times the acreage of the next most successful program in the country. So I think this demonstrates the innovative thinking and successful implementation of this tool in our region. And I think there's opportunity to do even more with it. So where is TDR being used? Nationally, there are over 200 TDR programs around the country. 21 of those are just in our region. And this includes 15 cities, all 4 counties in the PSRC geography. And then there are also 2 state laws that create regional scale use transfer of development rights. On this list, the bold text highlights those programs in which Forterra has had some role in the design of the program or an update to the program. And I just wanted to highlight that to really show our commitment to the use of this tool. It's central to our mission of innovating and scaling land-based solutions to address the climate crisis and to support equitable, green, and prosperous communities. The last one of these on the list, LCLIP, is the one that we're going to focus on a bit later. But first, I want to highlight how this tool has been used over time right here in Snohomish County. So this is a very truncated timeline of what's happened. There are some more milestones in this history, and I'm sure Linda and other folks from the county can fill in some gaps if I've missed anything, but I just wanted to highlight some of the main points here. The oldest record I found of the county looking at TDR is from a study in the early 80s. And then in 2004, the county created its first pilot program in partnership with Arlington. That just focused on conservation of about a 3,000 acre area in the upper Stillaguamish Valley, just to the west of Arlington, with one receiving area within the city. And then in 2009, the county updated the program to make more land eligible. And then 2012 was, I think, really a major shift where the county expanded the program to make it work on it across the entire county. Did away with the pilot and made it countywide. 2014 was another big change when a rezone of the multifamily residential zone happened, and that really opened up some new demand for the tool. And then in 2018, the county commissioned a study looking at creating a bank to facilitate transactions in the marketplace. And now today, this year, the county is pursuing the creation of a land conservation strategy and is pursuing the design of an implementation of a TDR bank. So those are what are happening currently. But really what I wanted to highlight through this retrospective is the idea that the county has been working on this program for a long time and continues to invest in this tool, which I think reflects the value that it can create in terms of conservation outcomes and advantages for growth management, both in the county and at the regional scale. So some specific activities that had happened back during the creation of the pilot program. Snohomish County purchased 49 development rights from farm, about 78 acres just outside of Arlington. And then a few years later, Cascade Land Conservancy came along and bought a handful of credits from a rural property. And then we managed to sell a few of those to a development just outside of Mill Creek. And then in 2019, we made another acquisition and purchased 14 credits from a 44-acre farm just outside of Everett. And then we sold several of those credits to a developer, and you'll see here there's a recurring theme that new construction within the multifamily residential zone was a catalyst for using TDR. So we were really glad to see that this land use policy decision that the county made resulted in some progress in generating demand. Since the inception of the program, the county's conserved 182 acres, and there have been 3 acquisitions and then 3 sales of development rights into receiving area projects. Then at the bottom of this list, there's one more that's we're currently in negotiations with a developer to use 3 more. So the tool has been used. It is being used, and that's encouraging. I think the success here I really want to highlight is the Vantage project that the Devco company based out of Bellevue is currently under construction. This was the biggest single TDR project being used in Snohomish County. This is from late 2019. This is just an artistic rendition of what the final project will look like. But this is a complex of senior housing. These are affordable housing projects on a major transit corridor. So I think this is the type of growth that I think really embodies the intent of the program, and that resulted in the conservation of a farm and a forested property in Snohomish County. So I like to show this example because it highlights that TDR can work at a very different scale from the downtown Seattle high-rise, which I think is a common connection association of TDR. It's been very successful in downtown Seattle, but I'd just like to remind folks that this can work at a much smaller scale in all kinds of communities. So it doesn't just have to be skyscraper construction. So now I'd like to switch gears and talk a little bit about the Landscape Conservation and Local Infrastructure Program, which takes the concept of TDR and changes it in 2 noteworthy ways that have not really been done before. This is a state program. It was adopted in 2011, and Forterra designed it in partnership with the state, with Puget Sound Regional Council, Pierce, King, and Snohomish counties, cities, tribes, farmers, foresters, developers, housing groups. There's a huge list of stakeholders who are involved in informing the design of this tool. So we were very thorough in getting a wide range of input and trying to achieve multiple public benefits. And really the intent is to create a financial incentive for cities to use transfer of development rights. This tool is a novel combination of TDR in its kind of traditional form, but with tax increment financing. And what we heard from cities, they understood TDR, they liked the idea, they appreciated the conservation benefits that it created, but it didn't really address all the challenges that they needed help with. We heard from a lot of cities that they were struggling to provide infrastructure and services to their existing population. And what they really wanted was flexible funding to pay for more public improvements that could support growth. We heard that infrastructure is expensive and that cities kind of face this complex patchwork of grants and funding sources that they have to piece together to pay for infrastructure. So having heard that, kind of our challenge was, could we come up with a more self-directed and flexible source of revenue? Can that help support steering growth to places where we want it in a way that conserves rural and working lands and helps to pay for capital improvements? So can we get growth and conservation and community investment all wrapped up into one program? And that was really the genesis of the Landscape Conservation and Local Infrastructure Program. which is a mouthful. So how does it work? Well, I'll show a couple slides here that kind of describe the mechanics, but the basic idea is that cities agree to place some number of development rights within their boundaries, and that number is flexible. We'll get to the details of that shortly here. But cities make a commitment. They say, we're going to place development rights within our community. And in exchange for that, those cities get to keep a share of the county's property tax revenue on all new construction for up to 25 years. So here on the slide, the city adopts LCLEP here. You take a snapshot of the assessed value at that point, and then as new construction is built, the tax base grows, and this incremental assessed value increases the tax revenues, and cities get to keep a chunk of that. So that's one way of looking at it, and I think the next slide illustrates the idea a little bit better. Over here on the left in this pie chart, this reflects roughly what the distribution of tax revenues is for any given property. A lot goes to schools, there are local taxing districts, and then cities and counties get the other big slices. So on the left here, in this center circle, this is the snapshot of today. And as cities grow, new construction is added to the tax roll, and the additional assessed value generates new property tax revenues, and effectively the pie gets bigger as new construction is built. So with that additional revenue, that increment accrues to each taxing district in proportion to what their share is now. So counties get more, cities get more, schools get more, same relationship as it is now. Now, if a city chooses to use LCLEP, then that distribution changes. So in exchange for accepting development rights, cities then get to keep a share of the property tax revenue that would otherwise go to the county from that new construction. So the county isn't really losing money, they're just giving up a share of their future taxes. Not all of it, they still get to keep some, but they are sharing up to 75% of that with the city that is using the tool. So there's no new taxes. The average property owner, there will be no change to their tax bill. This isn't changing the tax rate. It's just redistributing where the revenue goes, and cities get to keep more of it. So what can cities spend this on? The definition is pretty flexible. Infrastructure can be parks, it can be transit, it can be stormwater, and it can even extend to maintenance. So if fixing roads is your top priority, then that's something like this revenue can go towards. It's also worth mentioning that revenue from LCLEP can be used to match other funding sources. So you can really double the value there using this tool. So it's flexible, it's new revenue, and it's shared from the county. That's the source of it. So who can participate? Pretty much any city within the Central Puget Sound region. Actually, let me clarify that. Within King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties, cities that have a combined growth in population of 22,500. And if every eligible city in the region were to use this program, the amount of conservation that could result in is 650,000 acres. So to put that in context, that's about the size of 3 Mount Rainier national parks. So pretty substantial area that could be conserved if all 35 cities were to use this tool. From the city perspective, there are a few parameters that they need to follow. They can create multiple districts. This is a picture of Puyallup, and this is an example of the multiple districts that they are contemplating using this tool. The catch is that you can't enroll the entire city in the program. You need to cap it at 25% of the assessed value. So this encourages cities to think about, where do they want to grow? Where do they think growth is going to happen? Where do they want to make investments? And that can guide how they use the tool. How many development rights cities choose is also a matter of discretion. Cities can choose between a fifth to all of their allocation of development rights. What is their allocation of development rights? Well, when the program was adopted, all three counties, Snohomish, King, and Pierce, looked at their inventories of resource lands and tallied up all the development rights that were out there that they wanted to include in the program. And then Puget Sound Regional Council took that total and basically assigned the numbers to each city roughly in proportion to what their growth targets are. So cities with large growth targets would get a little bit more credits. Cities with smaller growth targets would get fewer. And then within each of these allocations, cities can pick and choose what their level of commitment is. So they don't have to choose all of their credits to place them in the program. They can say, well, we think we can place half. That feels reasonable for us. And so it gives cities just more flexibility in how they use the tool. The catch there is that the amount of revenue that cities generate is tied to how many credits they commit to placing. So this chart in the top right of the screen shows that the more credits you choose to place, the more revenue you will generate. So that is an incentive for cities to maximize the amount of conservation that the program will achieve through using the tool. All right, so historically, TDR is operated within individual counties. And one of the goals of creating LCLIP was to generate a larger regional marketplace, kind of like the European Union, where there's easier movement of goods and services around a region. Our idea was we can increase the supply and increase the demand that will lead to more conservation and more effectively support the regional growth strategy. So in this map here, you can see all these red dots reflect individual development rights. This is all the development potential that the counties identified we would like to conserve. And then these lavender colored cities, these are the eligible cities that can use the tool. So this just gives a sense of kind of where the development potential is, and then where the growth can go. And the idea here with creating this regional marketplace is to have a land use future where a developer in Tacoma can buy credits from a Snohomish County farm, or a developer in Linwood can buy credits from a forest in King County, or a developer in Bellevue can buy credits from the Pierce County TDR Bank. So the more options that people have, the more supply there is, the more demand there is, the more conservation we'll get out of this program. So that's the regional scale of how it's envisioned. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. So why would cities and counties want to use this program? Why would counties agree to forego future general fund revenue in exchange for conservation? Well, there's a lot of benefit. For counties, conservation is a big deal. King County has their land conservation initiatives. Snohomish County is in the process of creating something similar. So counties have realized it's really important that they conserve their resource lands, and having these market-based tools can be very effective in supplementing or complementing the existing publicly funded programs. So there's recognition that the conservation benefit here is really worthwhile. Secondly, this supports growth goals, and counties and cities both agree this is important, and they're willing to invest in. And then maybe a less obvious benefit to counties is a reduction in the cost of rural services. A dispersed population is very expensive in terms of providing roads and 911 service and trash collection and so on. All those services and that infrastructure can more effectively be provided to population in a compact land base, like in cities. So there's a savings to counties if they're not seeing low density residential conversion in rural areas. The city perspective, very clear benefit. Getting flexible funding for public improvements is really valuable. And then it also creates more resilient communities. The fact that cities can invest this money in things like improved stormwater management or more parks or street trees. This really improves their resilience in the face of climate change. It makes the cities work better, function better. They're more welcoming and more attractive places to live, which can make them more desirable and make people less inclined to buy homes, further away. So how has this been working in reality? Seattle is the only city that has used the tool so far. They adopted it in 2013, and the slide is actually out of date because I think the number of credits that have been committed for use in the city is now closer to 1,500. So just in 8 or 9 years, phenomenal uptake in the use of development rights, and also this revenue projection is probably too low. But Seattle has been using this money to fund streetscape improvements, better mobility through South Lake Union, more parks upgrades and acquisitions, and they're building a community center in the Cascade neighborhood. So a lot of great investments that are coming as a result of this. At a different scale, the city of Shoreline is in the process of pursuing the tool. They're currently working on legislation that would enact it. And Shoreline is looking at a geography that's includes largely the Aurora Avenue Highway 99 corridor, and then also the 2 new light rail stations, these areas in pink, and then corridors connecting those to the town center, and then a couple neighborhood business districts as well. So Shoreline is planning to take its full complement of credits, and the conservation potential from this is about 18,000 acres at the high end. And the city is anticipating somewhere between $19 and $25 million in revenue, and they want to buy more parkland. They want to improve mobility, connecting the light rail stations to other parts of the city, and build a non-motorized bridge over I-5. So this is how Shoreline is contemplating using this tool. So let's look at Snohomish County in particular and how cities in this county connect to Elk Cliff. There are 11 that are eligible to use the tool. And of those, Everett and Menlake Terrace and Arlington already have TDR programs. So if we were just to look at these 3 cities and assume they were to adopt Elk Cliff with a modest TDR commitment, the conservation potential here would be in the range of 4,500 to 35,000 acres. It's a big range because if it was all ag land, it would be on the lower end. If it was all forest land, it would be on the upper end, just given the zoning. And what's not on this list of the city of Snohomish, they have a TDR program, but they don't meet the size requirement to participate in the program. So this just gives a sense of scale. What's possible if all the cities in Snohomish County that are eligible to use the tool were to join the program? So pretty meaningful results here if that was to happen. So what are the benefits of Elk Cliff? How can that help conservation efforts and plans, and how does it relate to ongoing efforts within the county around conservation and restoration? Well, one is the Snohomish Basin Protection Plan. TDR has been identified as one of the conservation tools there. This can help to conserve lands that have been prioritized on the Washington Farmland Trust map. Revenues from development rights sales can help promote sustainable business models for farms in the Ag Resilience Plan. Snohomish County has some very clear comprehensive planning policies around using TDR, so this would be very much in support of those. And then TDR can be one of the tools among several that the county might consider pursuing more broadly in its land conservation strategy. So this is just a sample. This is not exhaustive, I'm sure, but just an example of current and upcoming efforts around conservation that Elk Cliff could help support in Snohomish County. So what's coming up next? In this coming session in Olympia, we're going to introduce some amendments to Elk Cliff to address some feedback we've heard over the last few years. The chief thing that we've heard is that we like from cities is we like the idea of getting money for infrastructure, but the value proposition isn't quite compelling enough. So if there was more money involved, we'd be more excited about using this tool. So that's the main change we're planning to introduce, is increase the value proposition both for cities and for counties. So there'll be more revenue for both local governments. The other big change is to expand the definition of affordable, or infrastructure rather, to include affordable housing. So cities can take the revenue that they earn through this program and either build affordable housing themselves or pass it through to a housing authority to build affordable housing. So that's the second big change. And then the third is to include some kind of a partner companion bill in the budget for an appropriation to fund adoption and implementation. So this is money that would go directly to cities and to counties to support the planning work to adopt the program and to implement it. So this is funding for capacity at the local level to use the tool. Also something we heard a need for. So some support from partners would be really valuable in Olympia. I think we talked about this briefly in the legislative and policy conversation at SLS a handful of weeks ago, but just wanted to reiterate that here, that having some support from partners in this group in Olympia would be really helpful for bringing a wider range of voices to the table and speak in support of this. Specifically in Snohomish County, what's coming up, the county is going to pursue the creation of a TDR bank as a kind of a market tool to help facilitate the purchase and sale of development rights. That definitely will make it easier for buyers and sellers to get what they need out of the program. And then the county is also looking at moving development rights into Seattle. This would be the first cross-county transfer of development rights in the region, and we're very excited for that to happen, because that would really embody the spirit of the regional scale of the tool. And then also here in the SLS, a work group has been active for a while around giving input to the county around comprehensive planning policies that would support the priorities of the SLS, which include farmland protection. TDR obviously has a piece of that. So that is what's coming. And then to wrap up, this will be my last slide here. This is just a recap of what LCLIP is and how it works. It's essentially a financial incentive for cities to use TDR. And for cities, it's pretty low risk. There's no, they don't lose out on anything by choosing to use this tool. There's no cost to them to use it. Since it's all market-based, there's a lot of benefit. And the idea is to wrap growth and conservation and investment in communities into a single program. So those are kind of the chief benefits here, and I'd be happy to take questions and save some time to chat about this. I'll stop sharing so we can see each other.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick, for your presentation. And as Nick mentioned, we have plenty of time for questions or comments or discussion. So feel free to put them in the chat, or you can use the raise hand function and we'll call on you. David.
Thanks, Nick. That was outstanding. I'm just wondering how the TDR program and LCLIP in particular factor in affordable housing. Obviously, that there's some extra money generated that gets transferred around. I'm just wondering how you answer that. It's a huge issue in Bellingham. So,
yeah, absolutely. And not just there. This is a question we've heard in a lot of communities. Is how can cities have asked us, how do we get the benefits of LCLIP in terms of revenue, but not have that compete with affordable housing, which is another priority that cities have made. And the way we like to approach that is to structure the incentive zoning program in a way that requires developers to provide both benefits as part of the program. So I don't think I have a slide that shows this. No, I don't. But in Seattle's a great example of this. So if you want to exceed base building height in Seattle, you have to provide both affordable housing and TDR credits in order to build above base density. And in Seattle, that split is 75-25 affordable housing TDR. So the bulk of the public benefit that comes through the incentive zoning program in Seattle is going to affordable housing. A quarter of it goes to TDR. And what that split is can be variable. It's really up to the local priorities, to local government to figure out what balance they want to strike. But I think that's a great approach, is to really focus on getting the most valuable public benefit from the incentive zoning program. And so that, we joke a lot about, developers getting bonuses for dog bowls and awnings, or, other design features that maybe don't have the same kind of public benefit as conservation does or as affordable housing does. So really encouraging cities to focus on those two, since they have so much value for the community. So that balance of providing both affordable housing and TDR through their incentive program, we think that is an equitable and productive approach.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Mhm. Alan's got one.
Thanks, Nick. That was great to see the full presentation after all the different conversations you and I have had about TDR over the years. I have, tomorrow, actually, with a number of the folks on this call with my FBD hat on, I'm having a conversation around legislative outreach. And I was curious, in terms of what you all are bringing this forward for legislative session. Are there key legislators at the state level within the kind of Snohomish districts that it could be helpful to have some messaging around? If we do FBD site tours, we're also thinking about ways that we can leverage those opportunities to carry partner messages and priorities forward. So I was just curious if there are some tie-ins there with like some key legislators in your mind.
That's a great question. I think there probably are. I would probably defer that question to our government affairs folks, because I am more on the policy side and a little less on the government affairs. So I don't know who exactly would be the best folks to talk to. In the past, I know I've spoken with County Council Member Jared Mead about this, and he's been very interested in it. And with his history in the state legislature, he's been very helpful in having conversations with folks who are still there, with whom he still has relationships. And but we do have some materials that just summarize this really briefly, what the proposed changes are and what benefits they would provide. So if it would be helpful for me to share those with you, I'd be happy to do so. And if you're able to wrap those into conversations that you already have planned, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and so would Skip kind of have an idea of like key legislators?
Yeah, I think Skip and Christy, we're working with a contract lobbyist for our legislative agenda in Olympia this year. That person will probably have the best sense. But yeah, Skip would be, I think, a great conversation to have.
Great, thanks for that.
Any other questions or comments for Nick or the rest of the group?
I might follow up with another one since
Go for it.
Some radio silence. And this is a bit of a leading question, Nick, because of another project that you and I are kind of teeing up, but what role do you think? So this is mostly focused on county and cities and the revenues generated by county and cities. What role do you think there is to also think about leveraging state investments?
That's a fantastic question. I think one thing that would be really valuable from the state level is providing planning grants. And this is something we've talked to at length with the Department of Commerce and other partners. We're hearing from local governments that, at the counties and cities, both, that they have capacity issues. It's challenging enough to meet their existing obligations around comprehensive plan updates and shoreline management plans, and just their routine obligations without taking this on in addition to that. So I think the state legislation to allow or to create funding rather through the budget process to pay for planning work that will give local governments help in generating capacity to adopt and use these programs. So that would be a great thing that the state could do. And then another is, I think there's potential for state money to be used as a basis for revolving funds that counties can use to acquire development rights and then resell them. So I think just like a one-time investment of state money to capitalize local TDR banks, certainly at least at the county level, would be a great investment in kind of starting that virtuous cycle of just kept starting the local market.